Our job is to build AGI in a way that benefits humanity and figure out how to safely and broadly distribute it. Our job is not to engage in like a Twitter fight with Elon. But when we have to respond to a legal filing, we will, and sometimes we'll provide context. I think we've only done this twice.
In the early days of OpenAI, the brand, like the way I encountered the brand of it was transparency and nonprofit. Like those were the things that it over and over emphasized. And the reason you said that you couldn't take any equity and the reason you took such a small salary is because you said, I don't want to be conflicted. I want to always be motivated to do the thing that's best for humanity. The day after OpenAI launched in December in 2015, you described it to Vanity Fair as a nonprofit company to save the world from a dystopian future. You also said that trying to make OpenAI a for-profit would lead to, quote, misaligned incentives that would be suboptimal to the world as a whole. I guess I want to ask, do you still agree with that? But simply, you've had to adapt to the reality, which is that developing these models takes billions and billions and billions of dollars?
Two things. One, I think I was a little bit wrong about that. And I have been, although I have had concerns, I have been impressed by how much, not just us, but the other AI labs, even though they have this wild sort of market or economic incentive, have really been focused on developing safe models. I think there's many factors that went into that. We did get a little lucky on the direction the technology went, but also if you deploy these models in a way that is harmful to people, you would very quickly, I believe, lose your license to operate if it was an obvious one. Now, there are subtle things that can go wrong. I think social media is an example of a place where maybe the harms weren't so obvious at the time, and then there was an emergent property at scale, and you could imagine something happening. But the incentive problem has been better than I thought at the time, and I will cheerfully say I was a little bit naive about how the world works 10 years ago, and I feel better now.
Naive how?
Oh, the pressure, the societal pressure on big companies and the sort of the power of researchers to push their companies to do the right thing, even in the face of this gigantic profit motive, have been pretty good. But there is something that I don't feel naive about that I felt at the time too, which is it continues to be fairly crazy to me that this is happening in the hands of a small number of private companies. To me, this feels like the Manhattan Project or the Apollo program of our time. And those were not done by private companies. And I think is a mark of a well-functioning society.
Do you think that we need a Manhattan Project here?
I think the companies are going to do the right thing and it's going to go well. And I don't think a government effort in this current world would work at all. I don't think it'd be good if it did, honestly. I wish we were in a world where I said this is, where I felt like that was the way it should and was happening.
Meta right now is also siding with Elon. A few days ago, Meta asked California's AG to block OpenAI from becoming a for-profit. And this is what they said in their letter. OpenAI's conduct could have seismic implications for Silicon Valley. If OpenAI's new business model is valid, nonprofit investors would get the same for-profit upside as those who invest in the conventional way in for-profit companies, while also benefiting from the tax write-offs bestowed by the government. This echoes what Musk said last year when he said, "I'm confused as to how a nonprofit which I donated to somehow became a market cap for profit." In other words, if this is legal, why isn't everyone doing this?
I don't know why Meta sent that letter, but I do know they know that's not how it works. I know that part's in bad faith. If you, in any of these worlds, our nonprofit will keep going, and the people that invested in the nonprofit don't. You don't get to have a benefit from a nonprofit donation accrue to a sort of for-profit equity, of course. And they know that too. You can imagine lots of other reasons that Meta might have sent this letter. You can imagine that they wanted, you can imagine they wanted to curry favor with Elon. You can imagine that they felt like it would help them compete with us. You could imagine that they were annoyed with us for a perceived anti-open source stance, which I don't think is accurate or something that I feel. I don't know. You should ask them what the reason was.
For the civilian who's hearing, how does a nonprofit become a for-profit? What's the answer?
It doesn't. The nonprofit stays as the nonprofit. I believe that the OpenAI nonprofit is on a trajectory, I hope, if we do well, to be the largest and most impactful nonprofit of all time. That nonprofit doesn't become anything else. Like many other things, our world, our ecosystem, can have a for-profit business also. But the nonprofit does not convert, the nonprofit does not go anywhere, the nonprofit does not stop doing nonprofit things.
At the end of the day, Sam, who is going to profit most from the success of OpenAI?
I'll tell you what I hope. Everyone gives their analogy for what technological revolution this is most like. It's the Industrial Revolution, it's like electricity, it's like the web. The thing I hope for is that it's like the transistor. We discovered a new, important, fundamental physical law, whatever you want to call it. We did a bunch of research, so did others, and it will seep into all aspects of the economy, products, everything. And you and I today are using many devices with transistors in them to make this podcast possible. Computer has some, your microphone has some, all of the internet equipment between you and me has a lot. But we don't sit here and think about transistors, and the transistor company does not sit here and make all of the money. It is this new incredible scientific discovery that seeped into everything we do. And everybody made a lot of money. That's what I hope AI will be like, and I think there's many reasons why it's the best analogy.
Will you have equity, or do you have equity, or what kind of stake do you have in this new capped for-profit?
Well, so we haven't formed a new entity yet. We have obviously considered forming a new entity, or maybe converting our existing LLC into one is more accurate. I have a tiny sliver of equity from an old YC fund. I used to have some via Sequoia fund, but that one turned out to be easier to sell and not keep the position in. So I have a very small amount that's quite insignificant to me. In terms of what I will or won't have going forward, I don't know. It's not there's no current plan or promise for me to get anything. I will, and if I got anything, it would not be, there were outlandish rumors about some number that would not happen.
Do you get why people are fixated on that?
For sure. As I've said many times before, if I could go back in time, I would have taken equity. I think, again, I understand more about why my earlier misgivings were misplaced. I also get that it's weird for me to take it now after not earlier. On the other hand, I would love to never have to answer this question again and be like, we're a normal company. I run it. I've got some equity. Investors don't have to worry that I'm misaligned. The whole air of suspicion of not having any is one of the decisions I regret the most of OpenAI structure things. But I understand why people are fixated on it. That makes sense.
If you could go back in time, how would you have done this from the beginning? Let's wind back the clock to 2015.
If an oracle had said to me on, November of 2015, before we set up, number one, you're going to need $100+ billion. Number two, even though you have no idea today how you're going to ever productize this and you think of yourself as a research lab, eventually you're going to become a company that does have a way to productize it and business model it so you can explain to investors why they're not just funding a research lab. And number three, that the incentives of people working on this are going to be more naturally kept in check, because it's not going to be what I and many others thought at the time of one effort that is way far ahead of everyone else, but something more like the transistor that seeps out, and so there will be better equilibrium dynamics. If an oracle had told me all three of those things that turned out to be true, I would say, great, let's be a public benefit corp.
How essential was Elon to getting OpenAI off the ground? If the oracle also told you about this fight that would ensue with someone that you regarded as your close friend, would you have said, don't need him, can do it myself?
No, he was really helpful. I'm super appreciative.
I think it was the first time I ever saw Elon Musk was on stage at a conference. You were interviewing him. You guys had a wonderful dynamic. You seemed like you were really good friends. He has said some really harsh things about you. He's compared you to Littlefinger in the Game of Thrones. Most devastatingly said, I don't trust him, and I don't want the most powerful AI in the world to be controlled by someone who isn't trustworthy. Why is he saying that?
I think it's because he wants the most powerful AI in the world to be controlled by him. And again, I've seen Elon's attacks to many other people, many friends of mine. Everyone gets their period of time in his spotlight, but this all seems like standard behavior from him.
I'm trying to put myself in a position of a former friend, a former co-founder of mine, saying those kinds of things about me. You seem relatively calm about it.
No, I'm upset by it for sure. I was talking to someone recently who I did think of as close, and they said Elon doesn't have any friends. Elon doesn't do peers. Elon doesn't do friends. That was sort of a sad moment for me, because I do think of him as a friend, but I don't know. I can look at this like somewhat dispassionately. I remember what it was like when he said OpenAI has a 0% chance of success, and you guys are idiots, and I'm pulling funding, and I'm going to do my own thing. There were moments since then where it felt like he kind of wanted to reconcile and figure out a way to work together, and then I remember moments where he's just like, off doing his thing on Twitter. But if it were only towards me, I think it'd be much more painful. But I think you see who he is on Twitter, and so I can like hold it somewhat impersonally and just be like, this is about Elon, this is not about me. It still sucks. I've had a long time to get used to it, I guess.
This recent blog post that went up on OpenAI's site said that Elon should, quote, be competing in the marketplace rather than in the courtroom. And the cynical view, of course, is to say, and you've alluded to this in this conversation, that Elon, who now owns an OpenAI competitor himself called XAI, is suing you not out of some concern over AI safety or anything else, but really just to get in on the competition. What do you say to that? Is the cynical view true? Is this really just a fight to be the first to dominate the market? Or
you should ask him.
I hope to. I invited him on.
Great.
You're not just known as one of the most important AI CEOs, AI developers in the world. You're also a very, very well-known proponent of AI regulation. And the cynical view here, right, is that in the very same way that you could cast aspersions on Elon's motives, you could look at the way that you have lobbied for AI regulations as a way to stifle competition and benefit your company. Obviously, you've heard that argument before.
I think too much regulation clearly has huge negative consequences in society right now. In many places, we have too much. Elon has also been a lot of proponent of calling for AI regulation, as has the heads of most other large efforts. When you step on an airplane, you think very high likelihood it's going to be a safe experience. When you eat food in the U.S., you don't think too much about food safety. Some regulation is clearly a good thing. Now, I can imagine versions of AI regulation that are really problematic and would disadvantage smaller efforts, and I think that would be a real mistake. But for some safety guardrails on the most powerful systems, that should only affect the people at the frontier. That should only affect OpenAI and a small handful of others. I don't think we're at the level yet where these systems have huge safety implications. But I don't think we're like wildly far away either.
But the argument that some of these startups are making, startups like there's an AI startup called Hugging Face, which is an unbelievable name, the founder of a company called Stability AI, they're basically saying what Sam and the other big guys, the incumbents, are trying to do, OpenAI, Google, and Apple, basically asking the government to kind of build a moat around you and stifle the competition through regulatory capture. What do you say to those people? And this is sort of like the argument between big tech and little tech. We can frame it in all kinds of ways. What do you say to those people who are saying, we want to get in on the competition, the regulation that people like Sam and others at many other times are pushing for will hurt us and benefit them?
Well, if what they're saying is we're behind OpenAI, so it doesn't matter, and what we're calling for is only regulation at the frontier, like only stuff that is new and untested, but otherwise put out whatever open source model you want. I don't think it's reasonable for them to make that argument. I don't know. I'm curious what you think. If we do, let's say we succeed and make a super intelligence, we make this computer program that is smarter, maybe more capable than all of humanity put together. Do you think there should be any regulation on that at all, or